Famed Hollywood director Rob Reiner has died, along with his wife Michele, according to a family statement. LAPD said they are investigating an apparent homicide at the Reiners' home after a family member discovered their bodies earlier in the day. That was according to a law enforcement official with direct knowledge of the investigation.
Rob Reiner's son arrested for murder. On December 14, 2025, Los Angeles police discovered the bodies of renowned director and social activist Rob Reiner and his wife Michele Reiner at their home. Following the investigation, police arrested the couple's son, Nick Reiner, on
This is how famous actor and director Rob Reiner tragically died. On December 14th, 2025, the world was stunned by heartbreaking...
Disclaimer. Urban Tea is an entertainment news channel. All content is based on publicly available information, reports, and sources. We do not claim any information as fact unless officially confirmed. Stories may include opinions or interpretations for entertainment purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised.
On December 14th, the world woke up to something unthinkable. Rob Reiner, the beloved filmmaker whose work shaped generations, and Michele Reiner, a respected photographer and quiet creative force, were found dead inside their Los Angeles home. 2 lives, lived in love, art, and family, gone. But the shock didn't end there, because standing at the center of this imaginable tragedy is the person they loved most. Their son, Nick Reiner, 32 years old, their child, now facing murder charges in connection with the deaths of his own parents. And with that revelation, the story shifted from celebrity tragedy to something far darker and far more painful. Because this wasn't just about a crime. This was about addiction, about mental illness, about parenting fear, about the slow, crushing anguish of loving a child you cannot save. For years, Nick Reiner's struggle with addiction was known, not whispered, not hidden. In 2016, he spoke openly about it himself. He talked about starting drugs in his early teens, about spiraling, about losing stability, about living on the streets. 18 rehab attempts. 18 times trying to get clean. 18 times hoping this one would be different. 18 times his parents believed, prayed, waited. And still, the addiction stayed. For Rob and Michele, this wasn't a phase. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't something discipline or money or love alone could fix. It was a relentless illness that kept tightening its grip year after year, despite every resource, every expert, every intervention. And that's the part that breaks so many parents watching this story unfold. Because if they couldn't fix it, with all their access, all their money, all their connections, then what hope does anyone have? According to people close to the family, Nick's addiction grew worse over the past decade, not because his parents stopped caring, but because it slipped further and further beyond their control. They tried everything. They tried pulling him close. They tried giving him space. They tried listening to doctors. They tried listening to their son. Nothing stuck. At one point, Rob Reiner admitted something that now feels heartbreaking in hindsight. He said that when Nick told them rehab wasn't working for him, they didn't listen. Not because they didn't care, but because they were desperate. They trusted the experts with diplomas on their walls instead of the child standing in front of them, begging to be heard. That confession alone carries the weight of every parent who has ever wondered, did I make the wrong choice? Did I push too hard? Or not hard enough? Did I miss the moment when everything could have changed? Even now, there is no confirmed diagnosis regarding Nick's mental health, but experts agree that addiction rarely travels alone. Depression, anxiety, psychosis, they often walk hand in hand, complicating treatment, blurring reality, and pushing families into constant fear. Fear that today's argument becomes tomorrow's emergency. Fear that one phone call will change everything. Fear that love won't be enough. Heather Hugelmeyer, a licensed clinical social worker and addiction expert, says parents living this reality often become frozen by guilt and shame. They replay every decision, every word, every boundary. And even when their children grow into adults, even at 30, they're still their children, still the baby they once held, still the teenager they worried about, still the child they'd do anything to protect. But addiction doesn't respect love. It doesn't pause for privilege. It doesn't bow to fame. It doesn't care how desperately parents try. And that's what makes this story so devastating. Because Rob and Michele didn't abandon their son. They fought for him. And still, they lost everything. In the aftermath of the murders, many parents across the country found themselves unable to sleep, unable to stop scrolling, unable to shake the fear that this could happen to them. Experts warn that consuming too much of this story can deepen that fear, turning anxiety into panic. Sometimes stepping back is necessary just to breathe. But there's no handbook for this kind of pain, no universal rule for how much help is too much or too little, no guaranteed answer that leads to recovery. Every family is forced to make impossible choices with incomplete information. What Hugelmeyer stresses is support, not just for the person struggling with addiction, but for the family carrying the weight alongside them. Because addiction is not an individual illness.
It is a family illness. It changes how parents speak, how they sleep, how they love, and without support, families break silently. She urges parents to watch for warning signs, escalating aggression, broken objects, violent outbursts, not because every person with addiction is dangerous, but because safety matters. Loving someone does not mean sacrificing your own safety. That truth is painful, but necessary. And still, for families who feel like they've tried everything, who feel exhausted, defeated, empty, Hugelmeyer offers one final reminder. Stay connected, lean on others, set boundaries not with anger, but with love. Because anger hardens hearts, but kindness, even when it hurts, leaves the door open for change. This story is not just about loss. It's about the quiet suffering behind closed doors, about parents who lie awake listening for footsteps, about hope that flickers, dims, and flickers again, about the unbearable reality that sometimes love does not save us from tragedy. Rob Reiner and Michele Singer Reiner were parents before they were anything else, and in the end, they were parents who never stopped trying. If you or someone you love is struggling with substance abuse, help is available. You are not alone, even when it feels like you are. Because this story, as painful as it is, reminds us of one heartbreaking truth. Sometimes the people who love the hardest are the ones who hurt the most.